So that's really it, Steve. If you have anything else to add, if not, we'll bring in our guest. Our guest is a lady called Kerry Cassidy, and she's involved with Project Camelot and Project Avalon. And Kerry is currently in California, PST time, so it's morning over there. So good morning, Kerry. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, no problem at all. Great to have you on the show. We know we aimed to have you on a few weeks ago, but we know you have a hectic schedule and you're all over the place, so it's understandable that things can go awry. But Kerry, people are very familiar with Project Avalon and Project Camelot, and you've done loads of work and interviewed loads of people. But just for people who don't know you, can you give us a background on how you woke up and your work, the stuff that you're doing with Bill and the interviews and how Project Camelot and Avalon came about? And just feel free, go with the flow and just tell us all about it because I know it's going to be very interesting.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me clarify. I am not part of Project Avalon. Actually, Bill and I did start Project Avalon together a few years ago, and that was basically to be a forum for, I guess, preparing for what was coming in the future, which might involve Earth changes and other kinds of things. However, our forum philosophies were different, and I left Project Avalon and basically gave it over to Bill, and I am. Bill and I created Project Camelot together, and I've maintained Project Camelot since a few years now. But Bill, from time to time, and I work together now. However, we don't really work together all that often. And he has basically taken the Project Avalon banner to be his site. So he kind of created his own site there, and on kind of on top of it, and then the forum is run by him and his mods. On the Project Camelot side, I started Project Camelot Productions, which is just sort of the production side of what I do for Project Camelot. I am a filmmaker. Originally, Bill was a webmaster and a writer, and I was a filmmaker and a writer. And so when we got together, we put our skill sets together to create Project Camelot. I have a forum on Project Camelot called the Camelot Forum, and many people will be familiar with that. So, okay, to how we started. Actually, the way we started was I was a frustrated filmmaker, and I was going out. Um, Originally, I had been an independent producer in Hollywood, and I worked in Hollywood for about 19 years, starting at the very bottom of the rung. Really, got out of college and went to Hollywood, so to speak.
Okay.
um, and that was graduate school. So I had quite a bit of training before I ever got to Hollywood. And then in Hollywood, I did something very unusual. I went around knocking on doors and interviewing directors and production people and basically trying to learn the ropes. And it was an interesting time back then. And strangely enough, I was invited in to just, I mean, really off. I mean, I had no preparation, no scheduled interviews, nothing. I just walked in and they let me in their offices and
Excellent.
and I got to interview directors and things. And then I started getting offered production managing jobs, which I had no experience in, which was really interesting because I guess people thought I could do maybe more than I can do. There's also an aura around in Hollywood about people that come to the business from college, or at least there was back then, thinking that they're bright and they're young and they might be able to bring something fresh and new. So they kind of open doors for you in that way.
Okay.
But as time went on, I worked my way up through that system, and I became an independent producer in the end, shopping sci-fi screenplays that I was writing and also projects that I got the rights to, such as Wingmakers. And wingmakers.com is a cult website, and you can go to it. It's a brilliant multimedia website, and that involves a story of a scientist who worked in black projects and how he goes on the run from the military industrial complex. And it was all about the Anunnaki returning to the earth, et cetera, et cetera. I got in touch with Mark Hempel and James, the writer of Wingmakers, and persuaded them somehow to give me an option, what's called an option on the rights to shop their project to Hollywood. Now, Spielberg had already been aware of that project, and as he becomes aware of almost every project that hits the streets, so to speak, in Hollywood. But nonetheless, I also brought it to Kathleen Kennedy, his story person, as well as Ridley Scott's, James Cameron, and so on. And basically was told no across the board, although the project itself is actually brilliant. And there's a book called The Ancient Arrow story that's part of it. At any rate, at that point, I got frustrated with Hollywood, and I decided to pick up a consumer grade camcorder, and I went around and started interviewing the speakers at conferences, at UFO conferences, because I had been writing sci-fi screenplays and doing tons of research on the net. And I figured it'd be really fun and interesting to actually get the speakers to talk about their own experiences, which they rarely did in those days. And so I was very successful at that. And one of my interviewees was Bill Ryan, who ended up to be my partner in Project Camelot. And initially, he was the webmaster for something called Serpo, serpo.org. And you can get that on the web. I think it might be called serpo.org or Project Serpo.org, one of those. Anyway, that was an alien-human exchange program that happened back in the 60s. And he had volunteered to be the webmaster. And I was aware of that because we were both part of Victor Martinez's news group that involves a lot of intelligence agents and other people in the military-industrial complex, as well as journalists, et cetera. So I became aware of Bill as the webmaster for Serpo. And since Serpo was sort of the hot topic back then, and this was in late 2005, I went to meet him at Laughlin in early 2006 at the conference there and interview him. And we had kind of a funny meeting because he was there kind of in the lobby typing on his computer, and he'd just gotten done with a very professional TV interview in which they had lights and cameras and, crew and all this sort of thing. And I went up to him and I said, we have an appointment. I'm going to do an interview with you. And he was like, I said, can you do it now, or when would you like to do it? And he was like, oh, I don't know if I have the time, in his English accent and all that nonsense. And I just said, well, here I am, and I've just interviewed Bill Hamilton and, so-and-so. So then I invited him. He finally agreed, and I invited him to my hotel room with my one consumer grade little handy cam. And he was like blown away.
Well, we've been there.
And so, but actually, I did a very good interview with him, and ended up going on the internet and going viral all over the place, and it was hugely popular. And of course, he was fairly impressed by that, and we kept in touch. I went to. My mother had passed away around that time, and I had a small inheritance, and I took that money to go to Egypt. With William Henry and Jordan Maxwell as part of a small group investigating the signs of Atlantis in Egypt. And then on my way back, Bill agreed to show me the power places in England, including Stonehenge and Tintagel. Tintagel is said to be one of the former homes of King Arthur. We went to Tintagel, and I had massive past life recall there, and basically kind of. We both just really clicked there. And that's where we created the idea for Project Camelot, deciding to put our skill sets together and to just go out there and try to bring the truth to the people. And in some ways to continue what Stephen Greer had initially started with his Disclosure Project, feeling that he had not been that successful, but that he'd opened the door. Bill was more familiar with that project than I was. And in a sense, I had already been doing that myself, as I mentioned. So it was just a natural fit, and it made perfect sense to us. We decided we wanted to interview whistleblowers from Black projects. We decided there was no website out there that was handling that sort of thing, and indeed there wasn't. And so the surprise was that we were hugely successful almost from day one. we just grew in leaps and bounds. Doors opened for us like magic. We got amazing interviews, and slowly but surely made our way through the years. It's now been over 5 years since that time, and we actually worked 24/7 on the project. We traveled around the world interviewing people. We asked for donations eventually. First, I was paying with my mother's the small inheritance I had. Bill brought some of his money from his team building job that he used to do. And then his mother passed away. We used a little of that money to survive. And then we also started asking for donations. And luckily, people started, contributing to our cause. And so we've been able to stay afloat since then.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And I mean, you have interviewed literally, loads of people during your time doing the interviews. And as I say, you can understand where we're coming from because we are in the same boat. We obviously a lot of alternative media, whether the radio stations or papers or websites, don't get any funding or they get very little funding. So it's really for the love and trying to get the information out there. And like you with the camera, we did the same thing. We didn't have a television crew, we didn't have lights or anything, but we went in. And the people who we did interview were very welcoming, and they understood. And we went in, and it just took off from there, and which is fantastic. But every week we do the show once a week, and every week we learn and we change things, and we're just amazed at the support. I don't know about you, but we are just really amazed. I have to say that, Steve. Both of us are amazed at the support and the people who donate, based on the current climate at the moment with money anyway. People don't have any money and things are very tight, but yeah, people still donate to us because they obviously believe in what we're doing, and I think that's fantastic. I don't know how you feel about that when that happens, when you get donations coming through.
Well, just before, I mean, Kerry answer, if you remember, Alan, I mean, and this is just let Kerry know this as well. When we started this originally, we just kind of we were actually frustrated that the information needed to be put out there, and there was no one else in Ireland really, no one was running a radio station, an internet radio station. So we kind of just set this up, and we thought we might run for possibly half an hour once a month, and then it grew from half an hour once a month to 2 hours every week.
Yeah,
and people still actually are still sending us in emails, etc., wanting us to do a 2 hour show every night. I mean, obviously we're family men, so we can't, but even we were surprised by the amount of support.
I totally understand. Well, it's great that you guys are in Ireland. I have to say, I was just in the UK, as you might know, and I was doing a speaking engagement in Glastonbury and attending the Megalithomania conference, which is just a brilliant conference set up by Hugh Newman. And encourage everyone to go to my website and to click on the ad there. You'll see you can even stream for a fairly low cost. You can stream the whole conference if you'd like to hear all the speakers and learn a lot more about your history as humanity than you ever dreamed of. They bring on wonderful speakers, and that's why I, as part of Camelot, want to bring those people forward. So I've done interviews with those people, and I also went to South Africa for the Megalithomania conference there, put on by Hugh Newman and Michael Tellinger. And anyway, that's a great new thing happening, which is all about turning history on its head and really revealing the history that no one, or that the mainstream simply denies exists. And they've got wonderful researchers who've written, zillions of books. In the case of Graham Hancock, he's probably the most famous and well-respected writer and researcher who started, in some ways, this whole trend, I would say. And he is basically also someone I've interviewed relatively recently, and there's I would say, a brilliant interview with him. Not because of me, but because of him. Brilliant. On my website.
Excellent. I think we actually emailed Graham and asked him to come on the show, and I think we have to get back to him. He's just quite busy at the moment. Now, we have a few people. We have a couple of questions on the chat facility, which we're going to throw at you now. But we're asking people want to phone in. People say, we want to talk to Kerry and ask Kerry a question. So the people who want to phone in, we have to respect everybody who wants to phone in. So if you phone in Ask Kerry the question, and then we leave it at that, because otherwise it could go on and on and on. And we want to give everybody a shot at phoning in and talking to Kerry. So if you do want to phone in, by all means, the phone number is 046 927 1212, or internationally it's 00353 46927